A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad. That's a quote from Shigeru Miyamoto. You know, the guy that made this. And this. And also this one as well. The guy knows what he's talking about. But sometimes the wait for a game eventually to be good can be way too heavy of a burden. The game will get announced, there will be trailers released, and then it will get delayed. And then it will get delayed some more. I don't know about you, but I've been waiting for a little game called Hollow Knight Silksong for a while now. Since 2019, actually. And the wait is really starting to get to me. Hollow Knight is a classic indie game that felt magical to play for the first time. The game was oozing with flavour, and what made it even more impressive was that the game was made by just 4 people. 4 people that were just passionate and determined enough to make something as big and as impressive as Hollow Knight. A game more impressive with even more polish than some AAA games have nowadays. And Hollow Knight was a Kickstarter funded game, and one of the stretch goals was for Hollow Knight to have a DLC with a new playable character. And that goal was met. But as the scope of this DLC kept growing and growing with no signs of stopping during development, Team Cherry eventually decided that it wouldn't be able to be a DLC. It would have to become a fully fledged standalone game. That and the fact that they realised Hornet was just too damn tall for the halls and doorways that the knight could walk through easily. What a funny technical issue to walk into. I'm so funny. I didn't even see that when I wrote it. Oh, I have to cut this now, I think. Fuck. Team Cherry eventually decided that Silksong would have to be a fully fledged game, not a DLC. And clearly the size of the game hasn't stopped growing, because the game was announced in 2019, and also had a fully playable demo at E3 in 2019. But it still hasn't had an announced release date. And because Silksong has never officially had a release date, it's technically never been officially delayed, but its announcement being such a long time ago, in essence, creates this same issue. The development team is working on the game behind the scenes, making sure it's good. Sure, it takes a long time, but as the saying goes, it'll eventually be good. It will eventually be good, right? Like, that's what Shigeru told me, it'll be good, right? It'll eventually be... Well, about that. Sometimes a rushed game is bad, and a delayed game is also bad. Cyberpunk was a huge ordeal that was meant to be a revolutionizing game. Technology was having to be invented just to make the game function. They promised so much. They announced the game in 2013, and 7 whole years later, it came out in 2020. But 7 years just wasn't enough time to polish and finish a game that had all of the features that this game was promised to have. This game was announced, got a release date, and then got delayed. Over and over, just because of how huge the scope of the game was meant to be. But because of how much hype had developed around it, the devs eventually felt so much pressure to stop delaying it that they just released it into the wild, despite the fact that the game was realistically not finished at all. But it just goes to show that your boy Shiggy isn't necessarily hitting the nail on the head with this statement. A game being delayed certainly makes it more likely to be good, since it'll actually be, finished when they release it. But it's not a surefire way to make your game good, because announcing the game causes hype, and then the hype causes this. Disgusting. The hype creates pressure for the devs that will likely cause them to buckle and bend, and such immense amounts of pressure can cause them to make terrible decisions. Especially when it comes to AAA companies, because like we mentioned last video, AAA companies have marketing teams and investors breathing down their necks. So if they think the hype is starting to die down, or that the wait has been too long, those marketing execs and those investors will force the devs into releasing the game far, far too early. And the rushed game is bad forever. Ain't that right, Shiggy?
Yeah.
Fortunately for any Hollow Knight fans, Team Cherry has no such problems. They never talk about Silksong or its progress. In fact, they don't say anything at all. Ever. They couldn't give a shit, actually. The hype that people are experiencing means nothing to them. Which isn't a bad thing, by the way. It's a really good thing that they don't give a shit. Because if they did give a shit, then maybe they'd start feeling that pressure. Maybe they'd start to buckle underneath the weight of the Reddit threads and the YouTube videos and this guy's entire channel being dedicated to saying the word no. I'd much rather they sit and make their game the best it can be, regardless of how desperately I want it to be out right the hell now. So I'm actually glad that they don't talk to us. And I'm glad that they're taking their sweet, sweet time with their game, because a delayed game is forever good. Mostly. There's also this thing that I've accurately named Sean Murraying, where you're just some programmer dude. You're not so good at PR and you don't have a PR guy, but you've got a game that's in development that isn't even remotely finished. But you go into interviews all like,
18 quintillion planets.
Will you be able to play with your friends?
Yeah.
Those have life. ecology.
Fucking space hookers and shit.
Every one of those stars is its own solar system. And there's an infinite number of variations of that shit.
Every planet in every solar system is fully destructible.
It's just too many promises. It's just too many. But you told millions of people that your game would have these things, only to realise that your relatively small game studio couldn't possibly produce a game that contained these things, even if they wanted to. But you have to release the game eventually, knowing that it won't have any of the things you promised. So when you release it, and it didn't have any of that, people just lose their minds and you look like an idiot. In fact, on the very first day of No Man's Sky's release, 2 people went to the exact same spot on the exact same planet, and they discovered firsthand that the game didn't have multiplayer like Sean Murray had promised. They couldn't see each other. And the devs responded by tweeting this, followed shortly after by this. It's fucking hilarious. But again, our friends at Team Cherry are clearly making the smart choice here. They're not buckling under the relentless pressure that Hollow Knight subreddit is giving them. And they're not Sean Murraying themselves in interviews once a fortnight in order to raise people's expectations either. They're doing the smart thing. They're laying low and letting everyone speculate and screech on their own time. But speaking of speculation, one of Hollow Knight's developers, Ari Gibson, said this in an interview in 2018.
We aim to make a very small game, a small Metroidvania, and then we had enough energy and budget and we're enjoying it enough to allow it to expand, but at any time we could have stopped that development, packaged it up, and had a complete game.
So in fact, it's entirely possible that Silksong's main story and quests have been finished for a very long time now, and they're just adding tons of additional stuff on top to make it feel fleshed out and fun. And also, the original Hollow Knight released on the 24th of February 2017, and at the time of writing, the 24th is in about 4 days. So maybe, just maybe, a huge info dump gets dropped on the 24th, and we'll finally all know when the game is set to be released. Or maybe not. I have no idea. I don't know anything. I don't know what I'm talking about. In fact, I kind of hope that that's not the case, because this video is meant to come out on the 25th. So a lot of what I've said would look a bit redundant and stupid if a huge announcement dropped yesterday, wouldn't it? Although having said that, I did a poll on YouTube and 78% of people said that Silksong will probably come out next year. So I don't think people have that much faith in an announcement on the 24th. But honestly, no matter what happens, and no matter when the game's released, I just hope that it's fun. I don't mind how long it takes, as long as it's worth that wait, as long as it's worth all of what I'm experiencing. And hey, maybe it's for the best. Sometimes the wait makes it all the more sweeter when you finally get your hands on it. It's kind of why yearly releases can be a bit boring and forgettable. Not only are they extremely similar to the game that came out the year before, just because of development time constraints, but you also don't have that exciting waiting period. That part where you're sat for years in anticipation, hyping yourself up over the game that's going to come out. That wouldn't exist if there was a Hollow Knight game once a year since 2017, would it? Maybe all that time we've waited and gotten hyped is going to make Silksong just that much sweeter when we actually get our hands on it. Thanks for watching.